to the show with your friend and mine. So tell me, Dr. Squee, who's it gonna be this time? We like to hear you talk, and we love to hear you listen. And if you are not subscribed, you won't know what you're missing. So welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Headphones up. Here we go.
Hello and welcome back to the Dr. Squee Show. I am Special Agent Squee because once again we step into the weird and wonderful world of Twin Peaks. Life after Laura Palmer's death and then reveal. Catchy, I know. So as always, I'm joined on my special mission by Deputy Jim from the Retrek podcast, my co-host from there. How are you doing today, Jim?
I'm good, thank you very much.
Just very quickly before we go in, just thank you. I posted a thing out. I've recently been diagnosed with ADHD, started my meds this week, so also a reason why I might be a little punchy today. But I recorded a special Dr. Squee Show about that, so thank you for all the kind words and people who watched that. Really meant a lot to me. But that having been said, without further ado, let's dive into Twin Peaks Season 2, Part 2. So as we discussed before, when we did Part 1 of Season 2, it was the shorter half, shall we say. But
yes.
This half is everything after it. So we got the reveal about Laura Palmer's killer. We've got Lynch leading the show just after this, and then Lynch rejoining at the end. So you get this sort of period in the middle where they're definitely trying to find their feet, and then you get this really awesome bit at the end. And it's not like there's no good stuff though in that middle bit. I think it gets rightly kind of like commented on as not the best of Season 2, but it's not completely awful. Definitely some good stuff in there. What are your thoughts on the kind of main structure of this kind of second part?
Yeah, I agree. I think it definitely spends a few episodes where it's just treading water and it has absolutely no idea what it wants to be. And then they kind of stumble upon the next arc, which is the Wyndham Earl thing. Which is a little peculiar because they introduced the idea of Wyndham Earl way back at the start of Season 2. And it would have seemed sensible to segue straight into that.
Yes.
But instead, there's 3 or 4 episodes before that kind of kicks in where the show itself is a bit rudderless and a lot of the characters are. And I'd like to say that's intentional and it's meta and it's reflecting what's going on, but I don't think it is. I think it's that they just really didn't know what to do with a lot of these characters, particularly sort of Laura Palmer's friend group. So you have James and Donna particularly, and to a lesser extent, sort of Bobby and Audrey. So the in inverted commas, teenagers.
Those young kids. God. They were younger than their characters, weren't they?
Probably.
I mean, I think some of them had bus passes for the elderly. That's all I'm saying. They were not cast.
Yeah. But yeah, it was almost like they were so intrinsically linked to the Laura Palmer story that they just didn't have a clue what to do with them. So you get these phases where they sort of experiment with, we'll make Bobby Ben Horn's assistant for a few episodes, and then we'll drop that, and we'll make Donna's gonna try and be the sexy bad girl, but then we'll drop that, and then we'll do a story where Audrey and Bobby are kind of a team for a little while. I can't think what to do with that. Bring Billy Zane in. It was a little bit all over the place.
Billy Zane. I'm sorry, but the height of his manly sexiness.
Absolutely, yeah.
just such a figure of man. Like I just, yeah, just perfectly cast in that role. I kind of wish I'd seen more of him. I'd rather have brought him in early and just fucked off Bobby.
Yeah, he'd have been more interesting. I mean, I think, we talked about a little bit on the previous episodes how they had this thing with Audrey and Cooper, and for various reasons, it didn't pan out, and that was probably sensible in the long run. But there is a sense that maybe that was where it was going to go, and because that plot thread's been dropped, it's like, oh, so what do we do with Audrey? What do we do with Coop? And they both end up having different love interests, but it doesn't sort of naturally flow into that as it probably would have done if they'd have gone ahead with the original plan.
Yeah, when they pick up the original plan, you can definitely see what should have happened in the middle. I actually said to you before, and I'm going to read a thing from Reddit, which kind of does a really good breakdown of when Lynch left and what happened in a second. But you definitely feel like where it should have gone. And I remember messaging you going, it's like, what would have been really interesting in this section is if they'd sort of done kind of the cult of Bob. So like the young characters which they didn't have anything to do sensibly with, maybe they they do that thing of the thinking this character's cool even though he's kind of evil, and like you get that thing of the satanic panic which was happening in the sort of world. I know this is filmed in the 90s, but it's sort of that town stuck in the 60s.
Yeah.
Like, you had that kind of it definitely covers a lot of storylines from 60s kind of soap operas and their kind of fears and sort of small town fears. So, and I think that would have dovetailed nicely into the end where they get disillusioned maybe and they see the evil, and then meanwhile Coop's finding out about the lodges, like the Dark Lodge and the what are they called? Sorry, the
Black Lodge and the White Lodge.
That's it. Sorry, I was not Dark and Light. So I think there was ways they could have, even without Lynch, done storylines which were more where it was, but they seem to want to reset it, I think, because where you said before the ratings had gone down and then they were trying to pull it back to the soap opera, but that felt so forced and so it just didn't work.
No, it didn't, and I think your idea about having like Bob as a presence even after the Laura Palmer murder's resolved, I really like that, because I feel like that middle stretch of episodes does lack the weird and the supernatural side of it, and it does just more or less just become soap opera for that little stretch there, particularly the James storyline where he leaves town and you think, yes, he's left town, but no, we're gonna follow him. Like, no, we don't need to follow him.
There's nothing
That's
left
fine.
to do. Like, I actually would have respected a storyline a lot more if, like you said, they just got rid of him. Just like that's the end of it. There's nothing to do with him. He comes away a hero because he's just saved Laura's cousin Maddie from the was it Maddie?
Why didn't she got killed?
No, sorry. Laura Flynn Boyle, sorry, character. Anyway,
Donna.
she's Donna, because she was after that guy who turns out to be a psycho. Just that, I don't know. He seemed to be on a high for his character at the time, is what I mean. And he involved in that save.
And instead, they do this thing that's just utterly disconnected from anything, where he goes and he meets this woman and there's this big convoluted story about she's conning him, and I mean it's just rubbish. It is just daytime soap rubbish. And then ultimately they bring Donna into that, which, like, can't we give Donna something more interesting to do while she's back in Twin Peaks and she's away from the dead weight that is James in this story? But no, they drag her into that as well.
Which sounds like she asked for to become a bit more of a femme fatale, and because she was dating Coop and Carl McLaughlin, he kind of helped persuade them to give him all that. And I think perhaps whereas they were a bit lost, they were quite happy to take that suggestion from her. But I mean, I don't know if she's done any writing outside this, but at the time it seemed she wasn't a great, like, that sounds ego over kind of trying to plot your
She like there are bits out there floating on the internet, but I mean it's not an enormous spoiler to say we don't see Lara Flynn Boyle in the Twin Peaks universe again from this point, and whether that was artistic differences or whatever it might have been, the fact is she's one of the few cast members who doesn't reappear in some form
Exactly.
later on. And it's a shame because Donna, particularly in season 1, I think was a really good character. I just think it was linked so strongly to the Laura Palmer of it all that they just really didn't know what to do with her, and unfortunately they never quite cracked that. Whereas I think with some of the characters, they do work out like a new status quo for them, and it does get better as this part of the season goes on.
Well, I've got here the sort of basically the synopsis which this guy's written. It's really good, comprehensive kind of thing of when Lynch stepped away and what happened.
Okay.
So it's a bit long, but I think it's worth it. So season 2, episodes 10 to 16. So this is right after Lynch stepped away and before he came back.
Yeah.
It seems that they only really storyboarded as far as episode 9 ahead of time, as originally planned story arc would have come next was rejected by Carl McLaughlin at the last minute. So this would have been what Lynch had planned. So it sounds like a McLaughlin kind of Lynch split which started this. Because they were writing the show as they went along after they resolved the Laura Palmer story, the writers had almost no break to decide where the show was going to go next. Definitely shows. Lynch had stopped contributing at all and went to Japan, and Frost was mainly focused on writing his new movie Storyville. So for episodes 10 to 16, writer Harley Payton basically became the showrunner. When people say David Lynch left the show during season 2, they're referring to these 7 episodes. So there's more in a second, but so what we've got so far is that basically officially they didn't step down as showrunners. This guy just basically stepped into the breach. So you can sort of forgive him for being very lost and having these episodes of because even at the end of those 7 episodes, they were better than the beginning. Just want to give him a bit of credit for that.
Yeah.
After a few weeks of neither David Lynch nor Mark Frost being very involved, the show spinning out of control, Bob Iger took them out to lunch and apologized and asked them what they could do to get them on board and working together again. It was here where David Lynch first started to contribute new ideas again, with his first being that Josie Packard's storyline end with her being trapped in a doorknob, which, that was kind of very... Actually, honestly, that particular moment, I thought the doorknob bit, I thought it was like, someone's trying to do a Lynch step, but it was actually Lynch.
See, I don't know.
Not one of my favourite Lynchisms, but
I've heard mixed things on that. So I mean, I'm not doubting the Redditors' research, but well,
maybe. As it says, he was just contributing ideas, not running it. So maybe his ideas and the translation weren't as good because he wasn't back yet. After this episode, ABC took the show off the air due to low ratings. Season 2, episodes 17 to 23. Despite its creative differences with the show, David Lynch campaigned relentlessly to get it back on the air. Sorry, that's my place. On the air. He held press conferences, went on talk shows, and encouraged fans to write to ABC. The fan support was enough that ABC ordered 6 more episodes and were even optimistic about a 3rd season, depending on how well these final 6 did. These 6 episodes were written and shot all together once Lynch and Frost were involved in the writing process, with Lynch coming up with a love interest for Cooper and casting Heather Graham, great ad, who he had worked with previously, as well as plotting out the direction of the final episode would take. Mark Frost began to actually write scripts again, and Lynch directed the final episode. These final 6 shows didn't do better in the ratings than those that came before them, so ABC cancelled it for good. So there is a bit more on the Reddit thread, but well done. Sorry, I haven't got the guy's name accidentally. When I was trying to bring it up, I flicked off the page, but I had a screen grab. So thank you to whoever that was. That was a really good, I think, synopsis of what happened.
Yeah, and that makes sense because that puts Josie's death as the turning point where they then came back, and yeah, I do think that's when it kind of picks up momentum again.
Yeah, and
So yeah,
I wonder if
that
they
makes
were.
sense.
I wonder if they were contributing ideas like the doorknob bit. If this was kind of like, because it seems like they do wrap up a lot of storylines at that point as well. There's so many storylines which get wrapped up. So I think they must have been at least collaborating near the end, saying it's like, right, this is how we're going to go. We don't need these storylines. We need these in the air, and that's where we're going to go from there.
Yeah, quite probably. I mean, there's a lot of the more sort of crime-oriented storylines going on at that point. I know that's always been an undercurrent, but like they have the whole thing about Josie turns out she's actually part of the Hong Kong mafia, and all this business about her husband whose murder she arranged, but he's not dead and he comes back. And then he knows David Warner, and David Warner's involved somehow.
Yeah, I almost forgot David Warner was there. This is how bizarre the show is, and David Warner's amazing.
Yeah, but it's weird. But all that is very convoluted, and it's almost like it's just padding out to take the time up in the episodes. And same with the whole James and his little excursion that he goes on. And what's the other one that's a weird sort of crime story that's going on at the same time? I'm sure there was something else around this time. Oh, no, sorry, it's not a crime one, but Ben Horn, like, they decide, right, well, yeah, he's going to reenact the Civil War now, and it's quite funny, but then as soon as that's done, they go, right, he's going to do something else now. And it is almost like they just didn't have enough material for him for 6 episodes or whatever. So they said, right, we'll do this Civil War thing. And then that makes sense with, like you say, if Lynch and Frost come back and go, actually, we've got this other idea, and now we can have him doing that. Let's get rid of this Civil War business. But I do find that funny. It's an amusing subplot, at least.
I mean, I think it's kind of like really interesting and really, like, considering Lynch and Frost, they really seem to very well pick up the ball where it lays. They might have said, like, right, this is where we need all the characters to be, but it kind of makes it like you said, Ben Horn there, his character then going on a path of good, but then he pays for his past crimes in the end, which we'll get into in a minute. But it's like they did do a very good job with that, I think, with kind of dovetailing it in from a period which was so different to their style, really.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's because of the nature of the show anyway, but the tonal shifts don't feel as glaring as they might do in something else, because it's an odd off-kilter program anyway. So, whereas I think the key was that in its better periods, they got that balance right. And so you might tune in and you'd get a bit of darkness laced with a bit of humor, with a bit of silly soap opera storyline.
Yeah.
And it'd work as a whole. Whereas there are parts of this season where it doesn't, they don't get the balance, and you end up just thinking, I'm not bothered about any of these plots that are going on at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think what saves it is the great characters, because you always get Cooper, who's a brilliant character, and you have threads running through all of it, like, for example, Norma and Big Ed. And you know, that's running in the background of all of it, and it's always something you can touch base with. But there are episodes where there's not enough good stuff for you to say, yeah, that was a great episode of TV.
Well, can we go through? Let's go through kind of the plot
Yeah.
threads, the kind of second part. Like, well, let's divide it into three parts. So we're in the middle part. So the some of the worst storylines we'll go for first. So, we already mentioned, not Bobby, the other James, when he goes off on his little journey, and now he is involved in a storyline where there's a woman, a rich woman, who's having an affair behind her husband's back, but the driver's actually her lover, and he's being set up as a killer. A very, very kind of dumb plot line. Him as the kind of like, it almost went softcore porn. I felt like it was going to go any minute.
Yeah.
It was not good.
No, I mean, they took the blandest character in the show and tried to give him this sort of risque story, and it's not. It just all comes across as bland. It's not connected with anything else, so you have no reason to care about it. Yeah, I think that's the worst bit of the season. You could cut that out and no one would bat an eyelid.
Yes, definitely.
There's nothing redeeming in it. All the other storylines have something, even if it's just a moment that you go, oh, that was good. But that, it's just nothing. It's just a big pile of nothing.
And you've got Andy, Andy's missus,
Lucy.
Andy, Lucy, and the guy who's come in, who might be the father of her child.
Dick.
Andy, Dick, and Lucy. So Lucy kind of comes and goes. She ends up going off to visit her sister, and then they get a replacement Lucy for an episode. You've got she's always, again, like always hilarious whenever she's on. And I will say Andy and Dick, very funny characters. But again, the plot line with them looking like being big uncle kind of characters.
Yeah, big, and then and then it's got this, well, he might be the devil, this child.
Yeah.
And you go, what? Like, this is a show where we've had, I mean, we'll probably talk about it a bit later, but essentially we've had Bob, who might be a demon, might be, is this pure evil. And we're doing this sort of jokey storyline about, oh, maybe this kid's the devil. And it's like, well, are they hoping that the viewers will go, oh, well, evil stuff exists in this universe, so maybe he is? Or are we meant to just take it all as a joke and it's Andy and Dick getting too worried about nothing? Like, the tone's just not right. They could have had a really sinister storyline with an evil kid, and that would have been interesting.
Although I was expecting them to uncover something from the past where, like, this kid had been possessed by Bob or evil.
Yeah.
And then he was actually a kid now, like, and, it's like, well, we won't talk any of these events that we found out. That would have been nice. And so it would have tied it in without forcing them to make it a big part of the plot. It's another thing that Bob did.
Yeah, exactly. All of this could have fed in, like, if there were lots of little subplots, but they all just had a little weird element, and then you could bring it all together at the end of the season. And, this is a symptom of, the lodge entities or whatever. But no, it's just this. Again, it's just a silly soap opera storyline that doesn't have any weight to it. But I think I would put it above the James storyline because Andy and Dick are funny.
Yeah. Again, stick those two on screen. I'm going to have a good time, but it just doesn't really belong in this plot. It's like, it's a great episode of some show, but not necessarily this one.
Yeah, put it in Days of Our Lives or something like that, and it'll be fine.
Yeah, they'd be the most entertaining thing in that. Like, they'd be the funny bit in this kind of quite serious melodramatic soap. They'd be the ones you'd be looking forward to seeing. And again, I did have fun watching them, but it just wasn't quite what I was here for.
If it was juxtaposed with something that was really compelling at the time, it'd be fine. But, like, going back to, like, season 1, when you've got Norma and Drape runners, when that's juxtaposed
which is not a
with the
euphemism.
whole... No. When that's juxtaposed with the Laura Palmer investigation, it's a bit of light relief. But at the time when you've got this weird devil child storyline going on, there's nothing elsewhere for you to get your teeth into to make it to make it worthwhile. I don't think anyway, but it is funny.
So next I want to jump onto one which I find about in the middle. Some of it's really good, some of it, the storyline loses me a bit. But you've got Norma, Big Ed, and Dolores and her memory issues. So I'm going to sort of like, there's kind of a couple of plot lines almost in one here. So we'll tackle Dolores and her memory loss and the fact that she's now a high school student.
Oh, Nadine, you mean? Sorry, that was me getting the names wrong. I got Norma and Nadine mixed up. Yes. So yes,
Nadine.
this one I don't think's too bad. I agree with you.
Well, it's not bad, but it's not great. Like, I mean, the whole thing of her, just like, I know there is so much realness and so much like things which just get accepted in Twin Peaks randomly. But the fact that she's suddenly in high school and everyone's going, yep, that's normal. Like, that just, I don't know, for some reason that one seemed a
like, I think generally the town of Twin Peaks puts way too much stock in what Dr. Jacoby says. Bearing in mind, this is a guy who
how is he not
had yeah, exactly. He had a weird relationship with Laura Palmer, and that's been generous. And he possibly withheld information that he should have shared. I know there's doctor-patient confidentiality, but that is supposed to be superseded when there's an immediate threat to the person or someone else. So, he perhaps dealt with that situation somewhat dubiously. But we're running around going, oh, right, he says the best thing to do is let Ben act out the Civil War. He also says the best thing to do is to let her go to school, and everybody's going, yeah, that sounds fine.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Dr. Jacoby. I don't know, like, because he just pops up in every storyline, but he's an interesting character. I do love him, but I never want him to be the psychiatrist for anyone I know.
No, definitely not.
But yeah, it's like the Nadine. Sorry, isn't Nadine now? Sorry, oh no, it's Nadine or Dolores.
Nadine and Norma.
Nadine. So Nadine, with her, so she suddenly got super strength, which never really gets like.
No, that is in season 1. There is a scene right back in season 1, where Ed gets the oil on the cotton balls, and she's on a rowing machine, and you see her, and she like bends the bars on the rowing machine.
That's right. Yes.
So it has actually always been there that Nadine has got super strength. So that's just one of them weird things that's always been there.
I mean, I suppose you could then justify, because it gets you so much more, that because she's lost her memory, maybe she's aware of it most of the time. So when she
she doesn't realize.
She just lives in the moment, whereas now she doesn't know she's got super strength. Okay, I'll give him that, but it's like it is weirdly suddenly everywhere. Like and she's dating this high school kid. Parents don't seem to pop up to have any issue with that. Fine.
No, I mean the high school has a very interesting approach to attendance, because Donna's supposed to be at school, Audrey's supposed to be at school, Bobby's supposed to be at school, but he's working for Ben Horn, and this guy Mike's is at school. He's the only guy who's actually at school, apart from Nadine. Whereas the rest of them are just like, I'm. You know what? It's all set. It's easy to forget that each episode's meant to be a day. So realistically, the whole show takes place within a month. So if we're being super, super generous, we could say that Donna, because she was Laura's best friend, Bobby, because he was Laura's boyfriend, James, because he was Laura's secret boyfriend, maybe they've all been signed off school because of grief. Maybe Dr. Jacoby signed them all off
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So if we're being really generous, we could say that that's why they're not at school.
Yep, we'll go with that. So going on to the sort of other side of that storyline, you've got Norma and Big Ed. And the thing is, like, for a while, I was getting lost in the fact that they're such a beautiful couple. Like,
Yeah.
Norma's husband is twat. Like, and Nadine was never particularly nice to Big Ed. But then, yeah, and they, it's this wonderful scene where they kind of decide they choose each other. And it's just beautiful and it's lovely. And then you kind of like, near the end, you see them with Nadine, and it's like, oh yeah, they sort of let her just go delusional, have sex with a kid, and like just like, maybe this wasn't so okay of them after all. But like, I think the Big Ed has storyline goes, I let this go too far. It's like, yeah, you fucking did.
Yeah, it's a bit kind of, you've got Norma saying, Nadine even, I don't know why I keep doing that. You've got Nadine saying, oh, well, I want to date Mike. And it's almost like Big Ed's like, oh, well, she's chosen to go off with someone else. Yeah, she's chosen to go with someone else, but she's having a severe psychotic episode. I wouldn't necessarily take that as my job here is done. I can walk away guilt-free, but...
And of course, Dr. Chernobyl going, it's like, yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
that's fine, absolutely. But no, I do love Norma and Big Ed, and I think that's the tragedy of it, is that they can almost be together, but then Nadine gets her memories back, and but it's one where you've got to suspend a lot of disbelief, because at some point you're like, right, the three of you just need to have an adult conversation, and Big Ed needs to leave her, but anyway, maybe we'll find out in the return how all that plays out.
Maybe. So I'm just trying to keep this in order, because I want to sort of like tackle the main thrust of it with Coop last, and with the with Don Davis. Sorry, I fucking suck with character names, but anyway, that's why I've got you, Jim. Like, you can't stop getting this is why you can't start getting the names right, Jim. I need you on this front.
It's only Norma Nadine. I'm all right now if we talk about other characters.
Good. We'll not mention them again then. Well, I think we kind of, the only one I can think of left is the sheriff's earlier storyline, where he loses the Asian woman who he's got a relationship with, who was
Josie.
Forced to because Josie gets forced to be a maid for a while.
Yes, that's quite funny, but again, it beggars belief, really, which a lot of this show does. When I'm saying it beggars belief and using it in a derogatory fashion, I don't mean that anything that beggars belief in this show is bad, because there's a lot of that and it works, whereas things like this don't necessarily. Like, okay, well, Catherine's gonna just have her being the maid, and sort of, but a little bit too silly.
I mean, it's sort of like with that, it's interesting, like you say, it's funny in places, but I wanted that to go somewhere more, her to build up resentment, her to be working on something. Whereas, like, you've got on the kind of parallel to that almost, you've got Wyndham Price?
Wyndham Earl.
Wyndham Price is Buffy. Anyway, Wyndham Earl. He's keeping Leo. He's keeping Leo in a vegetative state, kind of teaching him to be basically his henchman. It's kind of a bit Frankenstein. I thought that was one of the better kind of storylines running through, because it felt very Lynchian, felt very like to turn a guy into a beast. That even became a film, like Unleashed, with Bob Hoskins and Jet Li, if you remember that one.
Yes.
Like, where the guy was raised as a dog, basically. It reminded me of that.
Yeah, I like Wyndham Earl. I like the concept of Wyndham Earl. I like the idea of the chess game and how they go, oh, Pete's a chess expert.
Yeah,
And
yeah, that
I
was
love
nice.
that because Pete's a great character. He doesn't get a lot to do. And when he does, it's usually linked with Catherine and Josie. So it's nice to bring him into something else.
He always runs with it, though. They're a great actor, and he is a great character actor. You see him popping up in other things. And
Yeah.
he's always so expressive with his face. And I, yeah, like you say, it's nice to give him his own plotline. But whenever he's given anything, I just want to give this actor a shout out because
he's great.
I'm sorry, I don't know the actor's name, but he is always got whatever you do give him, he'll make the most of it and make it bigger than it should be. You know.
The only thing I feel like Windham Earl is a little bit of a missed opportunity because when he's mentioned early on, they set up all this backstory, and you want him to be the Moriarty to Coops's Holmes. And for me, I'm not having a go at the actor, but he just doesn't have that menace or that screen presence to fully sell it. There's something a little bit comedic about him, particularly when he's going round in disguise, which is just ridiculous.
I mean, again, I don't want to diss this actor, but I'm almost going to slightly inadvertently, but he feels like he should have been Jonathan Pryce.
Yeah, or you know what? David Warner was right there. You probably had David Warner in as many episodes, and he'd have been better as Windham Earl.
But he even looks like Jonathan Pryce. Though. You say,
true.
Warner would have done a great job, but like you could have popped David. I think it's because I kept on thinking of Jonathan Pryce and how much better he would be. I'm sorry to this guy. I'm sure he's done some wonderful parts. This just wasn't his. I don't think this suited him.
Yeah, and I'm sure he's playing it as it was written, and but for me, it just needed that little bit more menace, and he needed to have bad guy charisma that was equal to Cooper's good guy charisma, and he just doesn't. Like there's no doubt in your mind that Cooper will prevail in this. And yeah, it just needed something a bit more for me. And while we're on his disguises, like there's a few episodes that it goes through where when he's handing out the invites to the Miss Twin Peaks, and it's like he'll appear in one scene and he's dressed as something, and he'll be coming out of an elevator and he'll be dressed as something else. And it's like, right, I am not familiar with this actor or his work, so I don't recognize him, but I can tell who he is every single scene that he's in. And there are some scenes where Coop looks at him but doesn't recognize him because the disguise is so good. And it's like, it's not.
Mind you,
like,
the only thing I will say, that does play in the soap opera, and also we've seen what happens when you pull at that thread, because you get a Man of Steel, where suddenly they get rid of Superman's secret identity because it's a bit silly, but you lose that whole storyline of Lois Lane being in love with Superman and Clark Kent, which is so fucking interesting to the world of Superman. And I think, like here, you just that I don't mind that. And again, it seems the soap opera is one of the worlds in which Twin Peaks lives.
Yes,
I don't mind them having that suspension of disbelief, even though when Catherine dressed up, she looked like you didn't know it was her.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You know, there is a master of disguise in Twin Peaks, but it's not Windham Earl.
Yes.
You know, but yeah, I like the chess thing that's ongoing. I like Pete's involvement in it.
Oh, Pete was played by Jack Nance, just quickly.
Jack Nance, that's it. And I just feel like Windham Earl could have been a much more well-rounded and interesting character. It's one of these where the way Coop talks about him and bigs him up is great, but when we actually get him, he doesn't quite live up to it. But there we go.
Yeah. I'm sure I was going to say something else about the how do we get into them? It was another person who was
Josie. We were talking about Josie. Sorry.
Yeah. So no. I loved all that. That was perfect. So just to wrap up that with Josie though, I just want to mention the kind of nice episode where you get the sheriff going off the rails and kind of drinking too much, and I thought it was kind of a nice little moment for him to do something a bit different.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, because he's a great character, is Harry, but up until this point, he has been very clean cut. Almost one note, but I don't mean that in a bad way. Like his one note is exactly the note that he needs to be striking, so that's absolutely fine.
Good way of putting it.
But it does give him an extra layer, and it teases a bit of conflict between him and Coop, which we haven't seen up until this point.
Yeah.
And thankfully it does wrap up the Josie storyline, because it was getting far too convoluted, and all the stuff about the mill as well. Oh, I'm going to sell half the mill and I'm going to buy it out from under. Don't care. And the way she dies is interesting, because it reintroduces Bob and it reintroduces the little man from another place, and it reminds you that, oh, this is still Twin Peaks. This is still something spooky, and it's quite significant with that you provided about when Lynch and Frost came back, because that moment is a turning point, because it's like, right, we're getting it back on the rails now.
Just quickly before we go on, have you got a hard out at 7, or have you got a little while?
No, I'm good.
Awesome, because I wanted to quickly, before we get onto the meat of it, I want to go into David Duchovny, because I almost forgot. So good, such an interesting kind of storyline for how ahead of its time it is, and we had some really interesting discussions, which we'll bring in here, about it being very ahead of its time to have a cross-dressing character, as it would have certainly been termed at the time. Yeah. But maybe some of the language and some of the reactions and stuff might be different now, because you had so basically David Duchovny is playing a character which we've heard mentioned until now a lot, called Dennis, and he comes in as Denise. I'm going to word it this way, because it's definitely kind of seems to be mentioned as cross-dressing, not trans. So we had this conversation, because it's never to spell out, but it seems to be because he dresses as a man at some points and seems comfortable with that, doesn't seem forced or anything like that. So I think we're going to go with that being the kind of intent.
Yeah, he uses the name Denise, and he prefers to be called Denise, but the underlying thing is that this is Dennis choosing to be Denise. This is not Denise. And I think, to your point there, I think were this storyline done now, I think this would be an openly trans character called Denise, and that'd be that. And I think some of it, like when Denise corrects Coop, says, "Oh, it's Denise now," and then straight away Coop just refers to her as Denise from that point onward.
So much,
and that's brilliant, and that particularly from 2024 eyes, you think, well, that's wonderful, that's really progressive and really well handled. And there are bits where they lean into a little bit the sort of nudge wink wink side of it, which doesn't sit as well. And
well, there's to that point, I did want to mention that you got Hawk, who is so accepting the rest of the time, kind of goes like, "Oh, you don't see that," really, he's doing a little bit of a wink to the camera about it. So the sheriff, but Coop does I like the fact that Coop is the if you're going to make one of them not react like that, I think it should be Coop, because
it should be though
above that. But the other two, I don't think it suits their characters too.
No, and I think Coop, it's only very mildly undermined, but there's a bit where he leaves a voice message to Diane saying, "Oh, I must tell you about Agent Bryson." And the implication is almost like, oh, he's going to gossip with Diane about this. And that's the only sort of bum note, I think, in the way it's presented with Coop. And when they actually do the raid on, is it Jacques Renault or Jean Renault, or whichever Renault brother we're up to at this point, and there's kind of a shootout, and they sort of play because Denise is dressed as Dennis before
Yes.
that, but then decides, oh, I'll dress up as Denise and I'll show a bit of leg to distract the fellas. And
by the way, David Duchovny's young legs, very nice. I just to give him a compliment.
Well, as anyone who's seen Dwayne Barry, the season 2 episode of The X-Files where he's swimming in his Speedos, I'm sure there are a lot of people who will agree with you that David Duchovny had very nice legs back in the day. And I'm sure he does now. But yeah, and I almost feel like the show is almost inviting us to go, let's laugh at Jean Reno because he's eyeing up someone we know to be a man but he thinks to be a woman. And that, I don't like that element of it. But by and large, I think, bearing in mind we're speaking about a show from 1990 at this point, or 1991, to present a character who's LGBTQ to some degree, and to do it in a largely positive way, I think is very impressive. Compare and contrast with the episodes of Friends that feature Chandler's dad. This is light years ahead of that. And I'm not saying it's perfect, and I don't think necessarily that they gave it as much thought as would be given now, as to, like, we wouldn't be sat here now sort of debating, how does this character identify and what pronouns should we use if this show were made now, because it would be made clear and we would know exactly how to speak about it. And, just for anyone listening, I'm not meaning any offense in any way.
Yeah,
if
either of us,
if I misgender the character, I legitimately don't know how this character identifies, and I don't think the writers knew either. Yeah, and I think that's the problem in having a discourse about it.
Well, I can sort of add something to this, which I thought about afterwards. It's the fact that maybe, like, if you think about how people who were trans were forced to hide a lot of the time, I wonder if maybe, like, and some others would know better than me on this, like, I'm sure there were some people who were trans, but kind of like the only way of expressing that was through cross-dressing. That was maybe some sort of like mildly safer compromise, like something they could do and still live a daily life in safety. And I wonder if, like, Denise, it's that, like, it's like,
well, maybe if we get to catch up with Denise in a season 3 that's made 25 years later, maybe we will get an answer to this.
Preposterous that we'd ever see such a thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I found that all interesting though. But yeah, so we'll go into the main coup of it all. So I want to go in through I want to call him the General. It's because he's General Hammond in the
Major Briggs
in SG-1. Major Briggs. So he gets abducted fairly, like, straight away into
first episode, I think, after the
and it's a nice moment. I do love the fact that they're going was it fishing together?
Yeah, they go on a fishing trip because this is some of the problem that we talked about finding what do these characters do, because you've got Coop, who is an FBI agent who is assigned specifically to this case. The case is solved, so how do we keep him in this town? And they dance around this for a few episodes, but I love the fact that Coop decides, well, he gets deputized ultimately, But the first time you see it is in this episode where he's like, right, I'm going to dress like I live in the town now. You know, I don't have to wear my suit because I'm not an FBI agent at the moment. And so he starts wearing like this body warmer, like he's constantly going fishing. And that becomes his costume for until quite late in the run, really.
Yeah, because I do love that episode. That's one of the highlights of these episodes when he knows he's leaving. He says a heartfelt goodbye to everyone. The sheriff gives him the fishing thing, whatever you call it, the little dangly fishy thing, which is made the law. He's made him a law, which he gives him, and he talks him through the art of making one. It's just really nice. And then he goes fishing. With Don Davis, I'm just going to call him Don Davis. They go fishing together. All that setup just seems really very Cooper and very Don Davis and very all this. Like, it's perfect. And when Don S. Davis gets sorry, it's Don Davis at this stage, when he gets abducted, I was really hopeful for that. I was going, man, we're going to do aliens now. Ooh, I don't remember this from when I watched this originally because, like I said, I've forgotten quite a lot of it. But it's like, wow, I did not realize there was an alien. And
there isn't ultimately, but it certainly feels like that, doesn't it? For an episode there.
And how magical is Don Davis when he's on screen? But he is so lightly used. But then again, like we were saying about where's my brain for names? The other guy who becomes a chess expert, Pete. Like we were saying with Pete, when he does appear, he makes such a presence of himself that it feels like it's more than it is. We don't see Don Davis for a number of episodes. Then when he does come back, it's like he appears in the living room dressed in a World War II fighter outfit, which never gets explored again.
No, never.
And then he just disappears for several episodes. So after he's just been abducted and come back, he has one interview with the sheriff and Coop. Says a couple lines and then isn't seen for episodes later. I go, that isn't something you want to follow up on. Oh no, instead we want to go through where Bobby is now.
And he's got the weird abduction scars on him and everything. I mean, it is hitting all the tropes of alien abduction stories, but yes, it ultimately doesn't go down that road. But he is a great actor. It's a great character. He always brings a sense of gravitas when he's in it. And it's through him that we're introduced to this idea of the Black Lodge and the White Lodge, which we can infer that the Red Room that we saw in Coops's dream is one of these lodges, or perhaps both of these lodges. I think it's referred to at some point as the waiting room. So it's kind of a doorway between these two lodges that are referred to, and that feels like that's the mythology that we're going to delve into, and that they bring Wyndham Earle into that, and they do a bit.
He's looking for, and he's bugged the sheriff's office.
He's looking for this lodge, and he also worked with Major Briggs in the past. So we're sort of doing a bit of retconning. You know, you talked about how it feels like Coop was destined to go there, and it was almost making that sort of canonical at this point because we've got Coop's ex-partner worked with Major Briggs, who works in Twin Peaks, and his job is to monitor space, but also the woods because of this evil in the woods, and so they are building out this mythology, and I would have liked to have seen them do a lot more with that. But again, maybe we'll get some of that in the film and in the third season.
We'll pick all that up in a second. What I want to just throw in here is because we are near the end, we kind of go, there's a couple like nice little characterful bits which kind of happen along the way. I want to kind of get them sort of covered so we don't have to break like covering the main bit at
Yeah.
the end. So you've got Shelley with Bobby suddenly starts basically becoming her ex-husband, it feels like. So from someone who tries to support her, yeah, he gets this job outside, which I get it, they're trying to raise money, but then he suddenly starts ignoring her, treating her like crap. And I thought it was kind of an interesting, very subtle kind of storyline that he's basically becoming like her husband.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on that first, then I'll go to the next bit.
I think I feel bad for Shelley. She's like, she seems to be just caught in this perpetual loop of deadbeat guys who treat her badly, and I'm sure that's, you know, it's not the most pleasant thing, but I'm sure that's intentional. That's where it's trying to present, is this character who moves from one situation that's like that to another.
Yeah, and then we do get Gordon, played by Lynch, coming in again with his massive hearing. Like, I'm sorry, that's a funny bit. I know it's probably not cool to make fun of people with hearing issues and stuff. My mum's one of them, but it's very funny. I'm sorry, it is. It's just, and it is played that it's particularly a very old-fashioned, very silly device.
Yeah.
But yeah, he comes into the diner, sees Shelley, falls in love instantly, and suddenly he can hear her. And something which I said to you in the group chat is I thought it was just so sweet that Shelley has had her husband and then Bobby not listen to her. Bobby just became weirdly kind of almost abusive when she said, it's like, I don't want to enter in Miss Twin Peaks. He's going, oh, we can win money though, and gets slightly handsy. It was very icky.
Yeah.
And I don't think, even though Bobby wasn't one of my favorite characters, I've never like just found him despisable until now. But it's like, it is him coming full circle and becoming like a husband. And then the twist that Gordon, the only person he can hear is her. And he does hear her. No one else hears her. No one actually fucking spends the time to listen to her. And he does because he actually cares for her. And he sort of like even knows in the dialogue, he goes like, hey, look, I may never get this chance again. I'm not going to be back here. I am leaving to a bit. There's no suggestions that he's going to stay with her or give up the law or take her with him. So he goes in for the kiss. Bobby, of course, gets very jealous. It's just a sweet moment. And then I don't like the fact that she then went back to Bobby and then suddenly he's a good guy. Like, I mean, I believe that we are being told that he will be good from here on in. He's learned his lesson. That moment was come to Jesus for him. Yeah. And you were trying to wrap it up quickly. But I just preferred it if like either she'd gone like, wow, that guy actually gets me. Why would I settle for that again? Even if I'm not going to go off with him. What happened? Go off with him. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it would have been better. And who knows where it had gone if the show had carried on. But yeah, I really like your reading of that he's the only one who can hear her, and that's the one thing she's never had. I really like that.
Yeah, I just thought it was just a sweet bit of writing, and sort of something else I said was something which runs throughout the show is the kind of ickiness of different ages sometimes, but I think that is playing on soap operas where they do so often have like an older guy with a younger woman that in regards that this has got some remit as a parody to soap operas, you can sort of get away with it to a degree. I think the time also plays a factor in that, but like, yeah, the fact that
I also think that Shelley, among the, in inverted commas, teenage characters, because she has left school, that's part of her story. She's coded as an adult, whereas the others are not necessarily, or are not necessarily, at least at the beginning of the show. I think by this point, I think they all are presented as adults. Like, we don't, you don't really see any of the teen characters as school kids by this point. That's been well and truly dropped, I think.
Yeah.
But I think Shelley, uniquely among those characters, was always presented as an adult because she's the one. She's not at school. She's married. She's got a job. So I think that makes the age difference less noticeable.
I think also the one of the things which, like, I think that's all correct, but like I think it also slightly takes the sin off it that it isn't Lynch as in some shows of the time being all like, oh, she's hot. It's like he seems to, as I say, it seems to be a love at first sight thing. He can hear her. I think that's kind of a suggestion that it's a kind of like something more real than an, you know, it's not played in any way creepy. They remove any creepiness, like which I think if they'd made Coop be with any of the younger characters, I think it would ruin his character, but it sort of works here. Very quickly, you get Billy Zane also takes the virginity of Laura Flynn Boyle, isn't it? Or
no, it's Audrey.
Oh, sorry, Audrey. Sorry, Audrey. Which is just creepy. I'm just going to say that. And suddenly she goes from dressed in white to having a red dress on, which I swear
it's all a bit. This is, again, we don't know what to do with Audrey. Let's just have a subplot with Billy Zane. And it's a shame because Audrey was probably out of the young cast, was by far the most interesting character in the early going. Yes. And we just end up with this, which, yeah, it doesn't land.
And the other one, oh god, I've forgotten it now. There was another thing which storyline which gets wrapped up near the end here. I'll come back to me. But anyway, yeah. So we'll get onto the Cooper rule. I'll bring that back. Oh, sorry, no, I was going to say about Miss Twin Peaks very quickly. Again, another thing, probably like, I mean, certainly for the time, those pageants were still happening. Mm-hmm. I think it kind of dealt with it fairly well. Like, you still get women dressed up, kind of parading around the men, which isn't great. But I did find it interesting because we haven't really mentioned Heather Graham, but I love the love story between her and Coop, and she is great. I think she always, you know, what the character she plays a lot of characters which are sort of written very airheadedly. I'm not saying this one is particularly, but they're written that way. But she always makes it better. Like even when she was getting typecast, felt like she always added something to her character, which was really nice and didn't make it feel like just a one-note character, which with someone else it might have been. But it's the bit where she gives the kind of speech about the Native Americans and how great they are with the land. It's like, you've actually got Native Americans in the show. This is meant to be a place which has got a Native American population. So please, white girl, tell us what the Native Americans are like.
Yeah. I mean, again, that's kind of playing on the tropes a bit, isn't it? But I mean, it's not the highest level of satire, if that is what they were going for. And that's the other plot line we've not talked about, the mayor and the pharmacist and the young bride, later widow.
I think she's a succubus. They never quite label her that, but I think if Lynch had more time, I think she would have been revealed as a succubus.
Yeah, the reason I mention them is because the character of the pharmacist guy. So the first one that she gets with, the one that she marries and who dies, he is kind of the main character of the Secret History of Twin Peaks book that Mark Frost wrote in between, that's meant to be read in between season 2 and 3. So he's taken this character who's just in a very silly storyline who doesn't really do anything, and padded out that character's backstory. And I won't spoil anything that's in the book, but I just find it interesting that that's the approach that he took with it.
I think we're going to go, even though it's between season 2 and 3, we're going to cover that last. I think, I think
so.
It's going to take me some listening time because
the supplemental material can all come later. Yeah.
I think that's appropriate. That was the only other thing was Ben, of course, getting killed when he turns out to be that's Laura Flynn Boyle's dad, which again, it's kind of an interesting storyline. I kind of like the idea that he, after that experience of going mad and civil war, he then turns to good. It's like whatever's happened within that mental break, it's kind of cleared his head and made him realize that his life choices haven't led him to any happiness. He lost everything. And so, it's kind of like when he does good and like, it's almost like, obviously he didn't plan to get killed by her dad who she's been raised by. But I think he's okay. I think it's almost like, I'd rather die with my hands clean, having admitted to this last thing, than to die with anything, with any falsities on my hands.
Yeah, but does he die? You'll have to wait and see.
Well, that is what we're presented with so far. Again, I'm not like
It's
all of this is ignoring the return, because again,
yeah. But yeah, I quite like, and that's what I was talking about by getting the balance of the silliness. The fact that he's focused on, like, what is it? Is it a ferret or something like that? He picks out this animal, and it's all about the conservation of that. That's silly, but it works in the context, and that's getting the balance right. So yeah, I do quite like the whole. Oh, he's actually Donna's father. I'm not.
It came out of nowhere.
You
I mean,
did.
it sort of feels like, because the thing was, it was annoying because she was looking through all those old papers, all those old photos. It would have been nice if there was more of a build up of that's what it was going to be, or all the bits that you could put together. But it's like suddenly it's like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm your dad. Okay,
it feels like it, that like they're rushing to get to it at the end, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we've now covered all the subplots, and we're all going with the main
for now.
For now, but the main thrust of Coop. So having like we'll cut to the beginning of the last few episodes. So we've got the major is it? Because rank right even. Major, him, the major, the sheriff, Andy, who gets ignored, which is kind of quite delightful because everyone ignores Andy. And I love that for his character. It's like he gets to bring one of the salient bits of information, but he gets ignored to begin with, because of course he does, because it's Andy. And they start to put together this map to try and find where the lodge is.
Yeah, or the entrance to the lodge and the owl cave and all that.
So it does feel like a culmination. It does feel like finally some things are getting pulled together. With the kind of main thrust of it. We then kind of, I'm just trying to think of what bit sort of comes next in the story. So Coop goes off to
the end of Miss Twin Peaks, Wyndham Earl kidnaps Annie.
Yes.
Because he's decided that he's going to kidnap whoever wins Miss Twin Peaks.
And she's going to be queen.
But he realizes that Coop and Annie have got this thing going on. So he dresses up as the log lady in one of his brilliant disguises.
That's quite nice.
And kidnaps Annie. And that sequence is fantastically done, and it's not directed by David Lynch, but it feels like it is, like the way they have the lights flashing on and off, and it really gets into the horror side of Twin Peaks again at that point. And I think that's just kind of steadying you for what's going to happen in the finale, which Lynch did direct.
Well, you get just the moment when Lynch and the general are together. The second that they're together, I just feel instantly happy. Like, just those two characters who really haven't had much together, but feel spiritually like they're linked, like they're two of the spiritual characters.
Yeah,
that's just very nice. And there's even a bit where Coop says, and this is exact. He goes, because Pete says, like, log lady, wasn't log lady, it was it's Wyndham Earl. And the log lady will be here in 1 minute, and that's exactly 1 minute.
Yeah,
it's just such a weirdly Twin Peaks line of exactly 1 minute she will be here, and she of course steps in a minute later and hands him some oil from the area.
Yeah, that's been a running thing, hasn't it? That there's this smell of engine oil whenever Bob's about, and we find out it's from a pool in this grove where the entrance to the lodge is. Yeah, so this is the stuff that I really like. All this just weird supernatural stuff. This is when it's kind of firing on all cylinders for me.
Oh yeah, and the friend who comes in was there when Laura died, or found Laura's body, because she sniffs it and says, "Oh, that's the smell when Laura died." Am I remembering that correctly?
It's thingy, isn't it? It's the other woman who was in the coma.
Yes.
Renette Pulaski.
There we go. And so she recognizes the smell, so she knows that it's a Bob. And then pretty much we're going into the end game. Coop's on the trail. I think Andy goes off, gets told that he's the dad, which again, lovely little moment.
Yes.
He goes goes, "Oh, I'm so happy, I'm so overjoyed." The other guy's like, Dick's going, "Yeah, bye, losers." and then he goes like, "Oh, I'm so glad. I can't wait to be a family together." It's like, "But I gotta go and save Coop now. Bye." Just goes off. Perfect wrap up, really, to his main storyline. And then it's the sheriff and Coop heading towards the lodge. Am I missing anything which before we get into?
No, I mean we can cover the other cliffhanger, which is Audrey decides she's gonna chain herself up in the bank vault, and this sort of dovetails with David Warner had left a mystery box for Catherine Martell and her brother, and they'd opened it, and it leads to this vault, and when they open it, it's a bomb and it blows up. So that was an attempt to put another cliffhanger in to try and get a renewal. So theoretically Pete might be dead. Josie's husband, who we thought was dead but wasn't dead, might be dead again. And Audrey might be dead, so that's your other cliffhanger. But the main thrust of the episode, and you can tell this is full on David Lynch now that we're going into the Red Room, and it's just quite crazy.
Yeah, so Coop steps in, and this made me so sad because I after all the things I've forgotten from the middle, I'll never forget the ending and pretty much this whole sequence I remembered, and he's not coming out again, and that just struck. I don't want to preempt because we'll get there, but man, I felt so sad when he walked in. I just felt viscerally.
Yeah.
And he steps in, and suddenly there's a soul singer like he just never seen before. Not really.
Of course, why not?
Sings a lovely little song, and it's really nice, and it's very mournful. It definitely sets the atmosphere. You've got suddenly the strobe lighting, and I was just really struck by because this is the first time we really spend any time in the lodge.
Definitely.
It's just such a simple but really works kind of staging. So you've got the zigzag black and white floor, you've got the red curtain. And that's basically it. And then you just chuck in some armchairs when you need them.
Yeah, a bit of furniture. And we get like obviously Bob's in there, and I think possibly this is almost David Lynch admitting, the Windmill thing didn't work because Bob just kills Windmill, and that's that. It's almost going.
Windmill threatens Coop, and then he comes and goes, "No, you don't kill anyone. Fuck you."
Yeah, exactly. And it's almost like going, you're not the real villain of the show. This guy's the real villain of the show. And
it kind of reminds me of Angel when in the finale when it's the singer news guy, Lon, when he kind of shoots the guy who's been in there from the beginning.
Oh, Lindsay,
Lindsay, who's like a sidekick lawyer, and he shoots him and goes, "You don't kill me." Angel does his going, "No, sweetie, it's me." You're like, that's it.
Yeah,
that's You're not as important as you thought you were.
Yeah, it's a bit like that. Yeah,
but like it's less explored than that. It's just bang, he's dead. But yeah, it's kind of always quite fun when they do that. And so like we were talking about this just before we went on a message. So my take on the black and white lodges, you've got the waiting room, and then you've got the two lodges, which I think represent kind of good and evil. I think my take is the giant, who also turns out to be the bellhop, so they're the same character, which I kind of like. That's kind of cool. I think the giant and the little person which they actually use the term little guy. Coop uses. He doesn't use the word dwarf, or like I think he has in the past, but he doesn't.
Yeah,
use
they've
it
said
here.
dwarf, but I think dwarf is the accepted term now. So.
Well, yeah, I believe dwarf's accepted. The way certainly. I'm forgetting his name now. The guy who's in Star Wars, who presents
Warwick Davis.
Warwick Davis, of course. Warwick Davis has said it's like dwarf's acceptable, but like, you know, little person's seen as better. I don't know if that's universal, but I've kind of that's stuck in my head. Like little person seems to be certainly accepted anyway. But it's kind of, it's funny they use this little guy when little person becomes the nomenclature which is used today. I don't know. Just funny. I don't think that's anything purposeful, but it's like it's just kind of maybe go. I feel like those two are always trying to nudge Coop and give him directions on the path to solve things and make things right, which is sort of like good, not just choosing to control people, just choosing to guide them. And you see in the Dark Lodge, you see the kind of evil counterparts of them, it feels like. Whereas Bob, there's only one Bob because he controls people. He possesses people. He does evil with them. And like perhaps he chooses people who've already got some corruptions, because it feels like Leland wasn't exactly a good guy before he took him over. He maybe wasn't a murderer. He may be, but he was kind of corruptible. Whereas Coop is completely uncorruptible. He is wide-eyed. I love the fact that Molly was kind of like him in that regard. For different reasons, she'd just come from a religious sort of upbringing, but they kind of met on that kind of innocent, wide-eyed innocence.
Yeah.
Uncorruptible. So Bob never even tries to corrupt them. He tries to fucking kill them, but he doesn't try and corrupt them. Whereas, Bob just takes over and just does that, whereas good can only guide you. And I just thought that was my take. What did you feel on like what the lodges represent, what these people represent?
I think the idea of the Black Lodge and the White Lodge is good and evil, and I think the people that we see within it are beings. I'm gonna be as ambiguous as I can. I'm not sure whether, maybe they're gods, maybe they're higher beings. I don't know. I think Bob is like a force of pure evil and pure chaos within it, and I think the other ones can't necessarily contain him. But my reading of it has always been, and I think there were two baddies originally. There was Bob and Mike, and Mike possessed the shoe salesman guy. While Bob was possessing Leland, and
in other words, we might have been a sage in this world. He sold shoes. So just want to call that one back.
And it said in the Mike says that he cut off his arm because they had like matching tattoos that said "Fire Walk with Me," and he cut off the arm. You see, believe that to be the source of the evil, and the little person says that he is the arm. So to me, that means the little person is evil. Like. So to me, I've always, he doesn't really give Coop any clues. The giant gives him clues directly. The little person appears in a dream to him, but he doesn't actually give him anything.
Well, he the way he dances gives him a clue to Laura, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And I think there's a few bits like
Possibly.
that. It's less direct. I think he's less directly interventionist. Where we do see, he does say he's got a doppelganger. So maybe the arm somehow split him into, like, I don't know why
maybe. Well,
how that works. But it
you
feels
do have
like
two arms, so yeah.
That's a good point. So maybe that arm was the evil in him, which he cut off, and he was the good inside the body. Because there's two of him, and I can't see anything that the little person that we see more does that's out and out evil, whereas some's behavior could be at least suggested to be good. Whereas when you see the doppelganger version, he does seem very creepy and very.
Whereas we're all agreed that the giant's a goodie, though.
definitely.
We're happy with that.
And I feel like the waiting room is where any of them can interact with the
Yes,
other as well.
yes,
So they
that's
get
my...
forward. That's kind of neutral zone where they can each do their bidding, but they can't stop each other.
Yeah, I think so.
And that's why Coop, as we go forward, makes the mistake of running in further. And like, I mean, he's warned by the little guy. He goes like, if you see me again, it will not be me. And you've got Laura Palmer comes on and says, see you in 25 years, which fucking, again, I know Lynch didn't plan this, but it's like the fact that when he's coming up to 25 years, he's going, well, good timing. It's like, who gets to say that and then do it?
Yeah, that is cool.
And then you get, I don't know how metatextually to, because I think between you and I, we can come up with an interesting theory around everything. I have no fucking idea why they've suddenly like decided, only because you're going through the Light Lodge and Dark Lodge and the Black Lodge and the White Lodge, sorry. So when you go to the Black Lodge, suddenly you've got Laura Palmer's cousin Maddie as like evil, but it's like she was never evil.
No.
I can't think of a justification for that other than, oh well, she's got dark hair, so that'll look good.
Yeah, I think that's probably it.
Yeah. Oh, and you quickly see Ray Wise.
Yes.
And I like the fact that he says, because I think it's the corrupted spirit of him that's in there that we see.
Yeah, I think
he says, it's kind of interesting. The line he says is like, "Oh, I didn't do anything." Then he gives a sinister grin because Leland didn't, but this is the darkness within him personified. So
yeah, and
that
on like the fact that Maddie's there are a representation of Maddie. So we could say that it appears that if you're a victim of Bob, you can be in there.
But Laura wasn't. But I guess
Laura was killed by Bob, and Maddie was killed by Bob.
But Laura was in the waiting room, whereas Maddie was.
Laura's in the waiting room. Yeah.
Sorry, I just thought it was really interesting. I mean, maybe. Again, I'm kind of going large on the theory here. The only thing I can think of is maybe because they were cousins and they were kind of identical looking, maybe like they're more representative than one or the other. So like their spirits are kind of split. So everything that was good in both of them is in the Laura with the lighter hair, and everything which was maybe corrupted by kind of evil killing them. Well, anything was taken from them
possibly, or
in the Black Lodge.
Or it could be much as we get Coops's doppelganger, who appears just to be evil. It could just be a doppelganger of Maddie, created for reasons unknown at this point.
Yeah. It's
and indeed at any point, that's not a spoiler. We don't get an answer to this.
But it's kind of the fact we only see one of each of them. So I'm going to go with that. The good within them went there. The kind of the parts which got corrupted by evil by just being in the presence of Bob went into the Black Lodge. Let's go with that.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Why not? And it's just that's something just really does break my heart that then Coop is just stuck in there, which we might find him again in the waiting room, and then the evil Coop escapes. To go out with the sheriff, and it kind of wraps up very quickly. It does. There's a cliffhanger to the next series, and he starts bangs his head into the mirror, and we see Bob for one last time. And yeah, it just ends with him screaming to the mirror. What's he showing?
Where's how's Annie?
How's Annie? So obviously his next move is to go after Annie, which I can't remember what happens to him in return, so I'm really nervous for Annie.
Don't really find out. Well, I won't comment on the return, but in this, it appears Annie's dead because we see a bloodied body come out of the lodge, out of the waiting room. But yeah, we don't get anything further than that at this point.
Yeah. But geez, I mean, what a wild ride for an original series. We are going to go into Firewalk with Me and the Missing Pieces.
And I love the idea that David Lynch came back fully to direct this episode and just like, well, we're not getting another season, so you know what? I'm just going to go all out and Yeah, and
Well,
it's
I think it's both. I think I think you're right that he kind of like fuck it, like doesn't look like we're gonna get another series, so I'll go
yeah,
away.
yeah.
But it's interesting to note that he was going on every talk show. He's doing everything
Oh
to try
yeah,
and keep it alive. Like he's still, and obviously the cliffhangers mean that he wanted it to go another series, but I think in his heart, like you said, he knew it wasn't going to.
mm.
Um,
Well, we'll find out when we watch The Return if he wraps it all up with a neat bow, knowing that that's the
yeah,
end. But
I'm pretty sure he doesn't leave anything open, does he? Oh,
no,
that's my
yeah, I
recollection.
think
We'll find out
very
when I watch it. I get back.
yeah. But no, it's and what's weird is that for the longest time, this would have been until we got The Return. This would have been how it was left. And I know we get the film, but the film's a prequel. And it's just this horribly unsettling cliffhanger that it would have felt cruel to leave it there, and it did for such a long time. But yeah, we'll talk about in the coming weeks where it went when it did come back, which we most people thought we'd never ever get to see that. And again, without spoiling The Return, given that David Lynch had full creative freedom on it, I don't think there'll ever be a TV show quite like it again. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting conversation.
I mean, I think it's still all open for the re-return, whatever you might call it. But I think as much as I love the return, I find it just so weird and wonderful and fully Lynch, and it gives you not what you expected, but by doing that, it doesn't do Twin Peaks again. It does something new.
No, it
within
does
that world,
something
which
totally
that's what
different.
Twin Peaks was in the first place. Like I think if you do what people are expecting, you're not doing Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
Even if it's Twin Peaks, you're doing which my brain may explode at that sentence, but there we go. But we'll get there. So yeah, next week we will be back with the missing pieces and Firewalk with Me. Firewalk with Me probably main thrust of our conversation, but we'll get into the missing pieces. Yeah, I can't wait for Bowie. Anyway, Nate, any final words on Twin Peaks, the original run?
No, just it's one of them shows that I've watched it through a few times now, and it's always an interesting journey when you go back to it. So I've really enjoyed this.
Well, just to ditto that. What an amazing ride! What an amazing show. But for now, I have been Dr. Squee. Oh, sorry, Special Agent Squee. Joining me has been
Deputy Jim.
And until next time, we will see you in 7 days. And be kind.